the genre of shonen isn't exactly known for its complex, multifaceted women. Whenever female characters do receive screen time, they're usually there to act as eye candy or fill the role of damsel in distress. To which you may be thinking, yeah, duh, shonen's target demographic is made up of teenage boys. What awkward testosterone-fueled youth doesn't want to be a hero and obtain a girlfriend like pulling a shiny new item out of a chest? There are other genres of anime and manga after all. There's already shoujo for girls and josei for women. And yes, categorizing stories based on their audience is an effective way to market them, but the success of shonen like Fullmetal Alchemist is undeniable proof that it's not necessary. A series that was, unsurprisingly, written by a woman. This isn't to say that men aren't just as capable of writing women. I'd say Chainsaw Man is a good example of that, but a female creator in the male-dominated industry of shonen is a rarity, to say the least, and does help in adding some perspective. I'm going to be focusing on FMA Brotherhood for two reasons. One is that it features more female characters, and secondly, I haven't watched the 2003 version since high school, which might as well be forever ago. There's already videos out there explaining the many differences between the two, but the simplest way to put it is watch Brotherhood for an optimistic and therefore more faithful adaptation of the manga, and watch 2003 if you want to feel sad. I've read that some people prefer 2003 because the darker atmosphere lends itself well to FMA's more depressing themes, and that it handles the pacing a bit better, at least in the first half. But what I do know is that the ending is very abrupt, and I'm kinda miffed that it forces you to go watch a movie. And as said, 2003 misses out on some cool characters, so Brotherhood is better, sorry not sorry. Before examining the women of Brotherhood, I feel the need to preface the topic by first talking about fan service. One could argue that fan service is to be expected in shonen because, again, teen boys, and they like that sort of thing. But having been a very horny teenager once upon a time, I assure you it can only be shoved in your face so many times before it starts to feel insulting. Like, okay, I get it. More often than not, fan service is a thinly veiled attempt to keep viewers invested in what is otherwise an unappealing story. It's like if BlackBerry was still around and they made a public statement saying, yeah, our products don't really measure up with our competitors, but our phones have boobs on them now, and everyone likes those, right? The closest thing to a fan service character in FMA is Lust's design, but, you know, her name is Lust, one of the 7 deadly sins, kinda her whole thing. And out of the 64 episodes of Brotherhood, there is exactly two scenes involving partial nudity, one of which actually has some contextual value. So Winry's group arrives back at her place after being away for a while, right? And thinking no one else is home, she goes upstairs to change. Winry begins to undress before noticing that Ed is just chilling in the corner of her room eating a sandwich. She screams, and in the ensuing chaos, all the other characters in the house start pointing guns at each other. It's a genuinely funny scene, like something out of a sitcom, and the humor comes about not from Ed being a voyeuristic weirdo, but out of pure coincidence. And even then, the punchline of the scene isn't the fan service itself, but what follows after. I'm by no means a Puritan who thinks fan service is bad. In fact, I think it can be pretty nifty, so long as said characters have more dimensions to them than just their body measurements, and so long as the creators are willing to treat their male characters in the same fashion. It's perfectly fine for a character to show skin provided that it makes sense for that character to do so within a given context. I simply think fan service crosses the line when a character is forced into showing skin in such a way that contributes absolutely nothing to the plot. I'm looking at you, MHA. What I'm getting at with all this is that I can recommend FMA to people who don't ordinarily watch anime without feeling mortified because the author treats her characters with respect, whether they be female or male. The women aren't objectified, and the men have other things on their mind than just copping a feel. On top of that, the men and women actually complement each other in pairs, which I'll be examining shortly. I'll start off with Riza Hawkeye, a lieutenant in the Amestrian State Military and close subordinate of Colonel Roy Mustang. Mustang is Riza's superior, which means she's often seen shadowing him while receiving orders. Despite this, Riza is clearly not afraid to call out Mustang when he's being an idiot. They share a sort of husband and wife dynamic with a level of mutual respect between them. Mustang has the same sort of trauma bond with Hawkeye as he does with Maze Hughes, as they all supported one another through the horrors of war. But judging from her reaction to the news of Mustang's supposed death, it's safe to say their relationship goes a little deeper than just old war buddies. They keep things professional while at work, but we all know they're banging after hours. Riza wholeheartedly supports Mustang's ambition to become Führer in order to sow the seeds of systemic reform, and is willing to follow him wherever those ambitions may lead him. This level of trust, in turn, is what allows Roy to be vulnerable while in her company. Cementing their tragic connection is the fact that Mustang learned flame alchemy from Riza's father, and that she later asks Mustang to disfigure her back to ensure that her father's alchemic research is never again used for destructive purposes. Both characters in their own way contributed to the Ishvalan War of extermination and are therefore cut from the same blood-soaked cloth. Taking a look at Hawkeye's character in isolation, her time in the military clearly gave her a proficiency with firearms and the ability to stay cool in stressful situations. She also shows a nurturing side towards the Elric brothers and is a major source of inspiration to Winry. Interestingly enough, it's revealed in one of the OVAs that her encounter with Winry is the reason Riza decided to grow her hair out, and that Riza inspired Winry to get her ears pierced. Next up is Lan Fan, a member of the Qing Empire's Yao clan and personal bodyguard of Prince Ling. Lan Fan is typically the quiet and obedient type, but is quick to anger if the prince is ever insulted in front of her, as she feels the need to protect Ling from both physical and verbal assault. Similar to Riza, Lan Fan primarily exists to help further the ambitions of a male character, but is written in such a way that preserves her autonomy, because unlike Riza, Lan Fan is loyal to the point of being self-sacrificial. The most obvious example of this being when she literally sacrifices her arm in order to escape certain death at the hands of Wrath, which leads to her almost bleeding out in a sewer, something Ling isn't too happy about. The central conflict between Ling and Lan Fan is that she views herself as expendable, whereas Ling believes the lives of all his servants to have inherent value, hence his line, "A king is nothing without his people." This ironically means Lan Fan's behavior is often in opposition to Ling's wishes. He dislikes it when she puts herself in harm's way for him, despite that being a large part of her job, with the implication that Lan Fan's loyalty goes beyond even the duties of her clan. It could be argued that she was born into a life of protecting royalty, but Lan Fan does so with such fervor that there's clearly some individuality at play. She doesn't have much personality beyond her desire to serve the prince, but this makes sense when you consider Lan Fan's age. It's never stated in the anime or, as far as I know, the manga exactly how old Lan Fan is, but it's safe to assume she's around the same age as Ling, who was only 15 during the events of Brotherhood. She could be a couple years older, but no older than her late teens. In other words, she's at the age where most are just starting to figure out their place in the world and almost too eager to devote themselves to a cause. But Lan Fan is more than willing to show that devotion through her extreme actions. Izumi Curtis, martial artist, housewife, and alchemy teacher of the Elric brothers. Izumi has a very strict teaching style that borders on abusive, but for all her heavy-handedness and bravado, she still has moments of vulnerability. It's revealed early on that Izumi suffers from a chronic illness forced on her after attempting human transmutation. She tried to bring her miscarried son back to life and, in exchange, lost parts of her inner organs. Upon learning that Ed and Al had committed the very same taboo, Izumi reacts with an unexpected softness in place of her usual hostility, as she mostly blames herself for not warning them of the consequences sooner. Despite her personality not following all the norms of the female archetype, Izumi still cares deeply about her identity as a housewife and bearing a child. Unfortunately, the latter is something she's not capable of achieving herself, which is why she develops a maternal attachment to the Elric brothers. Izumi challenges the definition of womanhood with her intimidating presence, while still embracing the role of mother and caregiver. Olivier Armstrong is the commanding officer of Fort Briggs and older sister of Alex Louise Armstrong. Olivier is like Izumi, but devoid of any maternal instinct. She is cold, calculating, and often downright brutal. Her character treads dangerously close to #girlboss territory, but upon closer inspection, she's a little more complex than that. Fort Briggs prides itself on being a bastion of ruthless equality. Every Briggs soldier is placed on an even playing field regardless of sex, race, or former status. You either pull your weight or get left behind. Despite leading an entire battalion, Olivier doesn't appear to receive any real privileges from her position. She simply filled the role of leader because someone has to and is willing to challenge anyone who deems her no longer fit. Rather than dismantling patriarchy by becoming yet another corporate patriarch, Olivier is not wanting of special treatment. She exists to lead and nothing more. It is made clear, however, that Olivier's survival of the fittest mentality comes with its own problems, as she's rather unpleasant to be around. When her own brother abandons his post during the Ishvalan War, she immediately labels him as a coward rather than simply being too empathetic to handle the slaughtering of innocents. Olivier views any kind of emotionality as weakness, which makes her unable to function well in settings outside of the battlefield. She's anything but approachable, which Mustang finds much amusement in by presenting her with romantic gestures that he knows won't be reciprocated. Olivier does, however, go against her own orders by retrieving Buccaneer and the others from Pride's tunnels after the agreed time limit had expired, showing that she's not completely heartless when it comes to her own men. Last but not least is Winry Rockbell, a skilled automail mechanic and childhood friend of the Elric brothers. I used to find Winry to be rather annoying, and upon my most recent rewatch, that opinion has not changed. She's shown to be self-centered in how she feels bad for messing up one of her repairs on Ed's arm up until she realizes that Ed has no idea she even made a mistake, at which point she happily goes along with the ruse and accepts more money from him. She invades Ed's privacy by opening up his pocket watch that he clearly sealed up for a reason, and her character is held back by the frustrating trope of it's okay and even comical to physically assault men at the slightest provocation. Ed does a lot of protagonisting, he's going to get into fights, that's why he's paying you for a service, stop throwing wrenches at his head. The man is concussed. However, it's important to remember that Winry is also still a teenager and that Edward has flaws of his own, and the fact the two of them are constantly getting into arguments is a fairly realistic depiction of what young love is often like, messy and disjointed. I actually quite like the scene closer to the end of the story where Winry insists that Ed tell her that everything will be okay and that he's going to save everyone, and Ed points out how unrealistic she's being to the point that he just tells her to shut up and leaves. It demonstrates how there's always such a thing as wanting too much, even if those wants are objectively good. Aside from being Ed's on-call mechanic, Winry is also the main pillar of emotional support in Ed and Al's lives. Having grown up with them, she understands the two of them better than most of the cast and what they need to hear in a given situation. She's also there to show Scar the consequences of his actions after he kills her parents in a fit of PTSD-induced rage, but come on, Winry, you're a main character in a shonen. Of course one or more of your parents are gonna die. What do you expect? She herself has a tomboyish personality with a focus on male-oriented jobs and rarely hesitates to speak her mind. In spite of this, she's also shown to be very nurturing towards Hugh's daughter. She deals with conflict in an emotional way and maintains a feminine appearance whenever she is not working, often seen wearing skirts and dresses. Like most of FMA's main cast, Winry serves as an indicator that what we think of as masculine and feminine characteristics don't need to be mutually exclusive. It's no easy task to juggle a wide cast of characters in any piece of fiction, but Arakawa manages to keep both her main and secondary characters relevant throughout Brotherhood's entire plot, giving each of them a sufficient amount of personality and screen time. Generally speaking, people don't hate strong female characters, they hate bad writing, as well as the notion that the only way to elevate a female character is by having her talk down to all the men, which only makes her come off as selfish and entitled. At no point during my 2 full viewings of the series in high school did I ever stop and think to myself, gee, this anime sure has a lot of strong independent women, because it didn't matter. The women aren't treated as being less than or better than the men, they simply contribute an equal amount and are free to exist alongside them. It's clear that Arakawa wasn't as concerned about checking boxes or conforming to industry standards as much as she was with telling a compelling story, which I think is something all of us creatives should strive for: authenticity and substance over demographics. Thanks for watching. This is my second video covering FMA Brotherhood out of 3, so one more to go.